The most successful coaches never stop learning. They are committed to their personal growth and making themselves better. I'm Colby Donovan, and welcome to the Coaching Coaches Podcast. I'll speak with the world's most respected coaches, best-selling authors, and top business leaders to give you insight into their philosophies, lessons, and mindsets for you to apply to your own life. Head on over to coachingcoaches.co, where you can subscribe to this podcast and join some of the top coaches around the country who also enjoy our regular newsletter. My guest today is Jim Schlossnagle, the head baseball coach at TCU. Since joining TCU in 2003, he's taken the program to new heights by making the College World Series 5 times in the last 10 years and was named National Coach of the Year in 2010 and 2016. In this episode, he explains why he focuses so much on the mental aspect of the game with his players that he even brings in a sports psychologist to meet with the team every week. We also discuss why he chose to develop a mission statement and explicitly state 3 core values for his program, why he chose not to have team meetings after games, and what it was like to be chosen as the coach of Team USA. Please enjoy the episode. Coach, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So how would you describe to someone who doesn't know you your coaching philosophy?
I'm a big believer in structure. I'm a big believer in accountability. I'm a big believer in discipline and setting a framework for which the players have to live in, but it also allows them to become the very best version of themselves. And I'm sure we're going to get into a lot of little, what I would say, coachy type sayings, but we try to live by them. And one of them is how you do anything is how you do everything. And so I didn't play professional baseball. Certainly we're trying every day to help our guys reach that goal of becoming a major league player. And we've had several of those guys do that. But at the end of the day, they're going to spend way more of their life not as a baseball player than they are as a baseball player. And so my focus is just helping them become the very best version of themselves. And if we do that, and my job as the head coach, and that includes our staff too, is to give them every single tool they need to become the best version of themselves. And if we all do that, me included, then from a baseball standpoint, we will have the season that we're supposed to have, as long as we stay healthy. So, that's a long answer, but we try to set up a good positive culture here, which we have, that's self-sustaining, and continue to build on that each year and reteach it and allow the players to thrive within that.
I've heard or read you talk about being really intentional with your culture of your program. What do you mean by that? And do you have examples of things that you really focus on? Obviously, you talked about routines, but are there other things you focus on with your guys?
The old country song, you got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. So we have a mission statement. We have 3 core values. And for a lot of companies, those are just words on a wall or they're stuff you put on a T-shirt. But at least within our program, those are literally the things we live by. It's how I hate to use the word judge, but it's how I evaluate myself and everybody within the program. And then, but you can't just live on that. That has to be something that you work on daily, hold accountable daily. I'm real fortunate now. Our program has grown to the point where, I have assistant coaches, strength coach, support staff that have been here a very long time. They're super talented. They're very well compensated, which means that's not a boastful thing. It just means they're not really looking to go anywhere else. And so we have a real consistent staff. And so everybody, they don't have to believe 100% the things that I believe in, but they do have to speak the same language. And so we have that. And what that allows me to do is I'm not as into teaching a guy how to throw a curveball, because although I grew up as a pitching coach, I have one of the best pitching coaches in the country. I can tell you how to execute a hit and run, but I don't have to get into the minutia of that because I have an outstanding associate head coach that runs our offense. So as the head coach, I'm very aware of what's going on from an X's and O's standpoint, and certainly have input in all those things. And ultimately, it's on my shoulders. But I get to spend a lot of my time on relationships, culture, finding unique ways to teach the new players that, but also encourage that instruction to come from within the program. And that's when you really, when you have it going to the point where you have a senior class or you have older players that can manage the day-to-day discipline of the program, then that's when it's really special, because the best discipline is self-discipline. The best motivation is self-motivation.
Do you mind sharing what that mission statement is and what those 3 core values are, and then maybe explain, is that something you created at day one when you were hired at TCU? What made you come up with that and want to have those?
Yeah, so our mission statement is simply, the mission of our program is to help each and every person associated with the program, so not just players, but everybody, to become the very best selfless version of themselves. And then our 3 core values are selfless, excellence, and energy. And we don't just, again, we just don't throw those words out there. They're defined. So selfless is defined as, this life is not about you. It's about what you can do for other people, and what how can you bless others? How can you help others with the gifts that you've been given? Excellence is simply trying to become the very best version of myself in every area of my life. And just, we know that that's not going to happen in a day or a week or a year. But we're a big believer in the compound effect. If you've ever read that book, our team reads it almost every year, a guy by the name of Darren Hardy. And we believe that if we just, keep trying to make good decisions in all areas of our life, and we do those every day, they'll eventually compound on top of each other. And all of a sudden you'll look up and you've become the best version of yourself, at least in college. And then the last core value is energy. And that's just defined as, of all the things I can't control, I can control my attitude and my effort. And understanding that everybody's going to have a bad day, but how can you change your attitude, or how can you change your energy level? How fast can you do it? You can change it that fast. That's a choice you make. Some days it's really hard, but that's a decision you make, and you can control that. So that's our mission statement. That's our core values. How do we come up with those, or how long have they been in place? I've been the coach here just starting my 18th year. I was the head coach at UNLV 2 years prior to that. So this will be my 20th year as a head coach. And to be frank with you, I did a really poor job probably for the first half of those 20 years of being more just crystal clear with what our mission statements and core values are. I had an idea of what I wanted them to be. I would come up with something. I remember, I was reading, I was a 30-year-old head coach, and I'm reading, John Wooden's Pyramid of Success. And I came up with the Diamond of Excellence, and it was great. And it was something I would go over every year at the beginning of the fall, but it wasn't something that I didn't continue to teach. I didn't continue to enforce. I didn't continue to talk about it. And we work with a sports performance coach who I think is the best there is, of a guy named Brian Kane. We were the second school that he worked with in the spring of 2006. He was a young graduate student from Cal State Fullerton, and now he's blown up, and he speaks to companies and works with football programs and major league teams. But we were the second group he's ever been with. Matter of fact, we had a 2-hour session with him last night. We do every Tuesday night. And he came in one day and he said, if I went to your team and asked what it meant to be a baseball player at TCU, what do you stand for? What would they say? And I said, well, they better say this, and they better say this, and they better say that. And he said, well, let's find out. So we did it. And we have a classroom here in our ballpark, and they wrote down what they thought. And it was a lot of really good stuff, but none of it was consistent. And so on that particular team, I think it was 2011-ish, 10 or 11, no, not 10, 11 or 12. We sat down with all that information, and I knew kind of in my own mind what I wanted it to look like, but I wanted the players to have input as well. And I didn't want it to be long. I wanted it to be simple. I wanted it to be something that was easily stated. And that was all encompassing. And that's what we came up with. And so since that point, in the last 6 to 7 or 8 years, if any player that's played here during that time, I'd be super embarrassed if you ran across one of our guys on the street and you ask them that question, that they couldn't instantly spout that off. That's what we're about.
And so are you reinforcing those every day with your players? If you see a guy's moving slow in practice or doing something like that, are you going to say, hey, Johnny, your energy's off today. We at TCU are focused on this, and you need to pick it up?
Yeah, of course. And what's even better is when they do it to themselves. I mean, I'm constantly coming up with ways to reinforce what selfless looks like, and and again, not just on the baseball field. What does selfless look like in the community? What does it look like in the classroom? What does it look like in your faith, if that's part of who you are? What does it look like in the weight room? And same thing with excellence, same thing with energy. Like give an example. One day last year, I did a little social experiment, and I put a hidden camera out in front of our stadium, and I threw a couple pieces of trash on the ground, and guys start showing up to the ballpark about 1:45, 1:30 for maybe a 2:30 practice, some earlier, depending on if they have to get treatment or not. But I've set the camera up about 1 o'clock, and I just let it record. And it was interesting to watch who picked up the trash and threw it away, who saw it, and you watch them look at it and turn the other way and keep going, who had their head buried in their phone and literally never saw it but walked right over top of it. And just, that wasn't meant to embarrass anybody, but it's just, I want our players to be looked at as positive members of the community, as, the kids that when they're walking across campus, hey, yeah, I didn't drop that trash. And, in a COVID period, this is a little crazy to do it. But when I go on a run around campus or a walk around campus, I still pick it up. And to me, those things are really important, because we have a big saying in our batting cages about, the true test of a man's character is how he conducts himself when he believes no one's watching. And to me, that's really important, because for us to have success, you can't have, if you're going to be a coach watcher, if you're only going to do what you're supposed to do when the coach is watching, then, we're not going to get to where we want to be.
So did you meet with your guys afterwards and show them the footage, or say, hey,
showed them the whole video?
And what'd they say?
It was silence for a while. I cut out all the dead periods and just, and I said, listen, I'm about to show you something. I'm not trying to embarrass anybody, but these are examples of who we are. And these are examples of who, we have to be better.
I'm sure that was a fun film session.
It was.
So talk to me about your work with the sports psychologist that you say you brought in 2006. What made you say, you know what, we want to bring this guy in, and how has that evolved over time?
Well, I've always been a huge fan of the mental game, and I don't know if sports psychology is the right word, but just the mental game of sports, the mental game of baseball. What separates the best? Talent at the highest level becomes so equal. I've had so many players go to the big leagues, and they'll say, tell me the difference between a really good player in AA and a really good big leaguer. And most of them have said, take off the top 2% of just, the Alex Rodriguez, not that he didn't work hard, or just the elite of the elite. Everybody, he said, these guys, they all say it's all about the same player, but it's more about opportunity and staying healthy than it is anything. But it's also the ability to manage. I hate to call it a game of failure. Baseball is a game of opportunity, because there is a lot of failure in the game, but who can manage that? And so I'd always been a huge fan of a guy named Ken Ravizza, and he passed away, I think it was last year or the year before. And I had read, as an assistant coach, as a pitching coach, I'd read all of his books. The Heads Up Baseball, Playing the Game One Pitch at a Time, is the greatest baseball mental game book ever written. And it's very easy to read. And as a pitching coach with my pitchers, I taught that, and I tried to teach it like a class. I'm a teacher at heart. That was, I did my student teaching before I got into coaching. I was planning on just being I was planning on being a teacher and a coach, and before I got opportunities in college. And so I literally taught that book like a classroom to my pitchers, and then became a head coach, and I tried to do it as well. all the way up until 2006. And I wasn't doing a good job of separating results from process. And I felt like, and I still believe this, that the head coach's voice is super important, but it can't be heard all the time. You have to find different ways to convey your message that doesn't, it's like your parents. If your dad's constantly telling you the same thing, well, eventually you drown dad out. But if you hear it from dad and you hear it from mom and you hear it from an uncle and you hear it from a coach and you hear it from, a buddy, well, then things start to sink in a little bit different, or maybe someone says it a different way. And so I couldn't afford, in 2006, we were 14-16. And this is when we had a guy by the name of Jake Arrieta, who eventually won a Cy Young with the Chicago Cubs. He was 14-1 that year, led the nation in wins. And at the time, we had a losing record in the Mountain West Conference, which was a good baseball conference, but not a great one. And so I called a friend of mine and I said, I can't afford to fly Ken Revisa in here. I need a spark. I need something. And I knew it wasn't physical. And they said, well, Ken Revisa has a graduate student that he won't cost nearly as much. And we used him and he was awesome. So we flew Brian in, and I would have kept working with him whether we flipped our season around or not, but we did. And that helped the confidence that the players had in his message. Just the fact that we started playing better helped build that confidence in Brian. And now, again, we've used him ever since. And, it's not, he's able to present the messages that I think are important, that he thinks are important, in a more, dynamic manner that is way more conducive to 18 to 22-year-olds than coming from a 50-year-old guy who can read a book and apply those things. His presentations are awesome, and his follow-up's great. And so that's become just a really big part of who we are. It's part of our routine is to have him involved throughout the entire year. And he's accessible to our players. He's accessible to me. He's become more life coach than sports psychologist.
Okay. So when he does those meetings with the team, even if it's before COVID, what sort of things, life coach wise, psychology wise, mental game wise, is he going over with them? Is he doing presentations? Is it like a Q&A? Is it
all of it?
Sessions? And what sort of things is he talking about?
So he'll meet with the team. Then we'll usually do a breakout session with just the hitters. We'll do a breakout session with just the pitchers. And then now this is when he was coming on campus. And then we would set up individual meetings. The players would have the opportunity to sign up at their discretion if they wanted an individual meeting, or as coaching staff, we may say, hey, Billy really, really needs to meet with him whether he wants to or not. And most of it is about, there's a lot of things we can talk about, but most of it is about just building a consistent routine. And the premise of everything is you cannot be in control of your performance until you're in control of yourself. And so, in every sport, you hear somebody say, well, man, the game just really sped up on him. Or they'll say, well, the game, whether it be golf or basketball or football, is like, man, for some reason that guy's able to slow the game down. Well, what does that mean? How does that happen for some people and not others? And what we believe it is, it's actually a skill. It's part of the mental game is a skill set. Just like playing shortstop, to be a good shortstop, you have to have a good skill set. You have to have good foot speed. You have to have good lateral quickness. You have to have a strong arm. You have to have good hand-eye coordination. And those are things that we work on in practice. Well, the same thing applies to the mental game. And so the majority of his time is spent on those sets of skills that allow someone to be in control of themselves. Therefore, they can be in control of their performance, and then also create good, positive, consistent daily routines that can allow the compound effect, the book that stays right next to my desk every single day, that can allow the compound effect to occur. Understanding that the compound effect can also work negatively. So if you're not making the right choices, whether it be in nutrition or sleep or academics, that those will eventually compound on themselves. And so I'm just a big believer in those two things, the compounding effect of a positive routine, and how you do anything is how you do everything. And then whether it be a pre-game routine, a batting practice routine, a pre-at-bat routine, a pitch-to-pitch routine, those are all super important things to me that I believe have set our program apart. It doesn't make us better; it just makes us different. And so we work on those. I mean, we literally, that's a part of who we are in practice and throughout the course of a week.
Is there an example of, and you don't have to use a name, but a player that maybe struggled and then he worked with, and the guy, whether it's a pitcher who had got a routine and started performing better, or a hitter whose mindset wasn't right before working with him?
Oh yeah. I mean, almost all of them, because very few. There are a few. We had a player who ended up being the Big 12 Player of the Year in 2015 by the name of Cody Jones, his high school coach was a big fan of our program, and therefore he was a huge fan of Brian Kane. So Cody had been working with Brian, whether it be personally or through videos. His high school coach, did an awesome job of teaching the mental game. So when he came here, he had a great routine going. He was, with regard to visualization, imagery, his pitch-to-pitch routine, his breathing, all of that kind of stuff. But 99.9% of them aren't like Cody Jones. They have no idea. And then they get here and they try to, even if it's just an inter-squad game, it's deer in the headlights, the inning's over or they're out of the game before anything happened. And they're like, what just happened to me? And I was like, well, let me talk to you about that. And then we just take them through it. So, but yeah, I mean, we had a left-handed, to give you an example, and there are plenty, but we had a left-handed pitcher here by the name of Finnegan. From his high school was about 3 or 4 miles away from our campus. Not crazily highly recruited. He was kind of he's probably 5'10", what I would call a little squatty body, left-handed pitcher coming out of high school with a really good arm. I mean, he loved to throw hard, but wasn't a great pitcher. Wasn't very in control of his emotions, wasn't very in control of his day-to-day routine, not in control of his nutrition, not in control of anything. Well, over the course of 3 years, he went from, on a scale of 1 to 10, he was a 2 in all of the areas that I just talked about, where he had such great structure to everything he was doing, whether it be his nutrition, weight room, academics, all of that kind of stuff. And then his pitch-to-pitch routine, his pre-inning routine was so consistent that he became one of the best pitchers in the country, first-round draft pick. And he's the only player. You can go to the Cooperstown, the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, Cooperstown, New York, and you can see his TCU hat sitting next to the Kansas City Royals hat, because in 2014, he became the only player in the history of baseball to pitch in the College World Series in June for TCU, get drafted, and then pitch in the Major League World Series that October. And he's the only player to ever do that in baseball. And the beauty of it is Brian Kane was able to do this. We had video of him pitching in Omaha, and he would catch the ball from the catcher, go through his entire routine, get back to the rubber, execute the pitch. And we had the exact same video from the World Series against the San Francisco Giants, and we put them up next to each other, and they were literally identical to the second. So here's a guy who should be deer in the headlights. Holy cow, I'm in the World Series. 2 months ago, I was pitching against Virginia in the College World Series. Now I'm in the Major League World Series, and he's throwing strikes, he's executing pitches, and the only way he's able to do that is because he's in control of himself. So, and that was all learned here.
And I'm sure that's a great video to show younger guys when they come in, if they're a little resistant to anything, saying, listen, you can be resistant, but here's what a guy did who's a stud. And if it worked for him, I don't know why it won't work for you.
Yeah, and the beauty of that is, and we don't have to sell it too much because we've had success. The beauty of it is, when you look out to the outfield, there's no national championship banner just yet, but there are 5 or 6 College World Series logos up there, including 4 in a row from 14 to 17. So the reason that I said, listen, man, the reason you chose this place is because you trusted us with what we have going on. And so most of them, they come here. A basketball player is going to go to the great basketball program, or the baseball player is going to go to the TCU, the Vanderbilt, the University of Florida, Louisville, because it's proven. So, and that's not elitist. That's just, hey, there's a very clear path here. And as long as you buy in and give us total buy-in, and that doesn't mean that you don't have input. I mean, we learn from each other. I mean, there may be a player come in here, and there has been a player come in here and say, you know what, listen, I'd like to kind of add this to my routine because it's worked for me in the past. We're like, sweet. As long as you're consistent with it and you have a reason behind it, have at it. So yeah, it's the success, and that's the beauty of winning, is that you don't have to convince somebody of something before it happens.
Talk to me about those 4 College World Series in a row, and you go to TCU, you don't experience the College World Series, and then you get an incredible amount of success. How do you work on maintaining that over 4 years in a row? And then what's the mindset of, 1, trying to get back, and 2, trying to win it all?
We went to the College World Series for the first time in 2010. 2009, we were a game away. We lost game 3 of the Super Regional. That was the first Super Regional we ever played in. And then we had a breakthrough in 2010. So the 4 years in a row we went, nothing was very different, other than I'm very much a believer. And even when we were just going to the NCAA tournament, the more regionals you play in, the more of those environments you play in, the more comfortable they become. And, I just felt, and it goes back to the mental game. We had more players, more and more veteran players that had been in those environments. Those experiences put us on television more, which allowed us to recruit at a higher level. In the fall of 2012, we went to the Big 12 conference from the Mountain West Conference. That allowed us to recruit at a higher level. So let's don't kid ourselves. Talent is a part of this too. So when we didn't have a very good first year in 2013 in the Big 12, but after that, we went to 4 straight College World Series and stuff like that. But all of these things, Bill Parcells, even when he would coach in the playoffs, I'm a big Parcells fan. He would talk about, he never really used the word playoffs. He talked about the tournament. They were in a tournament. The NFL playoffs was a tournament to him. And postseason college baseball, that's what it is. It's just tournament baseball. And so when you go back and look at how we got to those places, we've won 22 inning regional games as the visiting team, which is impossible to do. We played Pepperdine in Super Regional 2014. All 3 games were 1-run ball games, and the last one we scored 2 in the 9th to win. We've played 16 inning Super Regional games against Texas A&M. We were down 8-1 with 2 outs and nobody on in the bottom of the 8th to North Carolina State in a regional final and won the game. So we've had, I hate to use the word luck. It's not luck. What is it? That's when opportunity meets preparation, but the ball's bounced our way. And I do believe the mental game's been a part of that. But, we've also had years, 2012, we went to a Super Regional and we didn't win at UCLA. And then we've had some years where we've had some injuries and really big injuries, and we didn't make the NCAA tournament. I believe that there are probably 40, roughly, college baseball programs in the country, maybe a few more, maybe a few less in a given year, that have a legitimate chance to win a national title. And you just have to put yourself in that situation and then go play the games and see how they play out. I mean, you're a Florida Gator. Your boy Alex Faedo kept us from winning a national title. He shut us out twice, and that was one of our better teams. We played in 2014. We played a 15 inning a 15 inning College World Series game against the University of Virginia, in which we destroyed 2 baseballs that should have been 3-run homers, but the wind was blowing in Omaha that night. So it's just all kinds of, there's all kinds of crazy things that happen. What you want to do is you want to be a program that's real consistent with everything that you can control, that gives you the best chance every single year. And then once you get in those settings, then it just comes down, to how you control your emotions and then how you play. And it's we're a firm believer that it's never about the best team. It's only about the team that plays the best. And we've beaten Texas A&M twice to go to the College World Series in 15 and 16. And no disrespect to our teams, we had really good teams, but their teams were really good and had played through SEC schedules. One was an SEC champion, and they had more players drafted, more players drafted at higher levels. And we happened to win the games simply because we played better on the third day. That's it. That's it. That's all that it is. And I think anybody that puts more into it than that is fooling themselves, because we see these kind of upsets or not upsets, but we see these things happen all the time in sports. And it's because you don't have to play better than them 9 out of 10. You only have to play better that one day. And anything can happen on one day.
If you enjoy this podcast, I also write a weekly newsletter sharing the best content I found in the last week that directly applies to coaches. Some of the best coaches in the world subscribe, and it's free. So go to coachingcoaches.substack.com or check out the link in the show notes to subscribe. Once again, that's coachingcoaches.substack.com. Let's get back to the episode. In preparing for this interview, there were a few things I found about you that you do that I thought were really interesting I want to touch on. One is you talked about your players coming to your facility when you had the trash out and you were filming them, and they had their head in their phones. Talk to me about your thoughts on players and their phones at the practice facility.
Yeah, so we don't allow phones into the ballpark. That they have to go past an area like most places do, where they pick up their laundry from the previous day for practice or game that day, so that each player has their own little cubby box where they grab their stuff, and that's where they put their phone. They grab their stuff and they turn their phone off or on silent, and they check and they put it right there. They can leave it in their car if they want, but it just can't go beyond that point. And that's, people say, well, why do you do that? Well, you want them to interact with each other, all that kind of stuff. And that's for sure, that's definitely part of it. But the bigger reason is it goes back to the mental game. I want a physical cue that takes them from student to athlete. And I want, even though baseball is really hard and sometimes practice is really hard, when they get to the baseball field, I want them to be able to take their phone, turn it off, set it down, and go, all right, I get to be a ball player for the next hour, 2 hours, 6 hours, whatever it is. And if you've been, an adult long enough, you know that when the game's over and I get my shower and now I go back and I turn my phone back on, any issue that I have is still going to be there, right? I still have that test to study for. Maybe I'm in an argument with my girlfriend. There's something going on at home, but at least Brian Kane, our guy we've been talking about, he calls it transitioning from the Boy Scout to the bounty hunter, right? So away from the field, every coach wants their student athlete to be a Boy or Girl Scout, act the right way, do the right things, make the right choices. But when you get on the field, you want them to be the bounty hunter. You want them to be aggressive. You want them to have some big self-confidence, big body language, big ego. Not ego that takes away from the team, but just self-confidence. And so that part of the phone thing is to help them transition, kind of like Superman going into the phone booth. He goes in kind of the nerdy guy in a suit and comes out Superman. So, those are the reasons in which we do that with the phones.
And how do the players handle that? I mean, I'm sure when they come on recruiting trips and stuff, that they see that and are aware they're coming into that. But do you get pushback from them? Do they fight it, or they're kind of like they learn to embrace it with Brian too?
I think once they learn why we do it, they're good with it. I mean, they don't have a choice. But I also believe it takes some pressure off of them. I don't want to be considered a jerk, but I have no problem being the jerk if that helps. You can say, listen, you can't call me after, I'm not even going to have my phone on me after 1:30 because my jerk of a head coach doesn't allow us to have our phones in the locker room. Well, that takes the pressure off them. And, if girlfriend likes to call him all the time, that he can blame it on me if he wants. But yeah, the parents love it when you're talking to them about it in the recruiting process. And, don't get me wrong, our guys aren't perfect. There was a time, it was probably 16, I think. I don't put my face in the players' locker room very much because I believe players need their own space away from the coach. But I had to walk through there for some reason, and I opened the door and I saw one of our players with his hands up in his locker, and he had his phone in there, and he was texting somebody. I didn't say anything. This was actually before a game, and this is one way that I know that I've matured as a coach, because years ago I'd have blown up and screamed, and we're getting ready to play, and that's not a good way to enter a ball game. And I just remembered it. And so about the fourth inning, I pulled one of our equipment managers over and I said, "Hey, I need you to do me a favor, because nobody's in the locker room during the game. I want you to go through every locker. If there's a phone in there, I want you to put it in a bag." Well, shoot, there was like a dozen phones in there. And so the game ended, and I don't have post game unless for some specific reason I need to meet with the team. This is another great life change, really, that I made in my coaching career in 2013. I don't meet with the team after games. I mean, I'll just say, "Hey, tomorrow team breakfast at 8:45. Make sure you're on your player duty. Have a good night. See you tomorrow, win or lose." Well, I did that, and then I just basically ran to my locker, didn't shower, and I had all the phones, and I took them home with me that night. Now, you take a phone away from, I didn't yell at them. I didn't send a text message saying everybody's in trouble. I just took them home with me. And the next morning at team breakfast, I took the phones that I had, and next to the scrambled eggs, I just laid them all out and just sat and I went and ate my breakfast. What was funny is, as the guys came in, there was their phone. They're looking over their shoulder. They didn't know if they should pick it up and put it in their pocket, anything. But the message, I still have yet to say one single word about it. But the message was sent that, obviously, that's not acceptable. But yeah, they get it now, and I'm not a fool to believe someone hasn't snuck one in there because they needed to. And they're, and I tell them, "Listen, if you need to make not during practice unless it's an emergency, but if you need to make a call, like your mom had surgery, or you need to check in on a professor or a class or something like that, I got no problem with you. Go grab your phone, go out in front of the stadium, out the parking lot, make the call you need to make, send the text you need to text. I don't care about that. We're just not having it past this point in the stadium."
I love that story. So when you talk about how when you first were a head coach, you probably would have yelled and screamed and been upset, that's kind of how I would expect most coaches to handle that. So can you talk about that maturation process for yourself and kind of maybe any other ways you've evolved over time?
Oh my goodness, constantly evolving. You can't preach one thing and do another. So, I want to hold the players accountable, but I have to be in control of my emotions too in order to control my performance or my head during the course of a game. And I mean, I'm always going to hold players accountable to attitude and effort and the things we believe in, but I believe there's a time and place to do that. We still had a ball game to play. I'm very competitive. I don't mind losing a game if it wins a season, but in those smaller instances, I can pick and I've learned to pick and choose my time. And it's also about each individual team. There maybe have been other teams that I didn't trust as much, that had other issues, that I would have blown up. Whereas that particular team I'm talking about, I trusted them. They just pushed the boundary a little bit, and I didn't need to scream and yell at them because for the most part, they were doing everything right. They're not going to be perfect. And there have been other times that I have other teams where, like the team I currently have, which was our team last year, all of them are back because they were given extra year of eligibility. The team that I have now, I can go to two players right now and say, "Listen, here's what I know happened. You need to handle this." And they'll say, "I got it." Or they'll come to me and say, "Hey, we just want you to be aware that this happened. Don't, some of these guys are in their 5th or 6th year of college. We don't want you to say a word. Just, we got it." And those are the best teams, man. when you can trust a team, when you can trust them to self-discipline, when you can trust them to hold each other accountable, when you can trust them enough to where you can applaud them, like say, hey, you guys are doing a heck of a job, man. That was awesome. You're doing really well. And then the next day they don't take advantage of that and think they have it all figured out. To me, that's when you got a chance to have a really good season. I don't know how the ball is going to bounce, but it's going to be a fun group to be around. But I've evolved in 1,000 ways, whether it be my biggest problem when I became a head coach is what I personalized the performance of the players. I was so caught up in the win or the loss going next to my name, more importantly, the loss, that, my negative body language, negative feedback during a game especially was detrimental to the team. And so that's something over the years that I've really made a concerted effort to be better at. And I still have my moments, but I feel good about where I am today versus 19 years ago.
And what made you realize earlier on in your career that, like, okay, my body language and I'm getting too upset right now and it's affecting my guys and I need to make a change?
So we have a big banquet every year. Every year I've coached both schools that I've been a head coach at. We have a preseason banquet every year, and it brings back almost all of our former players, whether it be at UNLV or at TCU. And you were a part of the basketball program at Florida. When everybody gets back together and what do they start doing? They start telling stories, about this or that. And it's never really about, oh, do you remember when this guy hit the 3-pointer? Or no, it's, you remember when coach did this or when coach said this. And so I was standing around with a bunch of my former players who I adore, and they started telling stories. And I was like, I said that to you? And I was like, I am so sorry. And I went home that night, and I remember with my wife, and I was like, I'm embarrassed. And it's amazing. For most people, you can say 10, out of 10 things, if you say 9 positive, and 10 years later, they don't remember much of the positive, but the one time you jumped them and maybe it wasn't warranted, or you said something you wish, or used words that you wish you wouldn't have said, they never forget it, ever. And it wasn't like it scarred their life or anything, but I was embarrassed, to be honest with you. And so and that's where the whole not meeting with the team after a game thing has really evolved for us. And it's been absolutely life-changing. And when young coaches or coaches ask, when they ask about things we do different or a piece of advice, at least in the sport of baseball, that's one thing I always say is, and there are plenty of great programs that meet right after games and go over things and talk for 30 minutes. And those coaches are able to do it. But for me personally, it's just not, to me, it's not a teachable moment. And it has literally changed my life.
That was the other thing I was going to say when I researched that I saw that you do that's pretty different. I don't think I've heard of before. So is it more so you want to take time to digest the game yourself to talk to the guys? Is it you think that they're just kind of in an emotional moment, win or loss, and aren't ready to hear a message? What's kind of the thought process behind that, and why do you say it changed your life?
Well, here's the reasons why. Number one, baseball, we are the most warmingest, uppest sport known to man, right? So if we play a 6:30 game, we have team meal at 2:15. We have early batting practice. Then we have a scouting report meeting. Then we stretch. Then we have another round of batting practice, our normal batting practice. If we're at home, we have to wait for the other team to take their batting practice. Then we take a pregame round of infield and outfield. We're at the field for 3.5 hours before we ever even play a 3 to 4 hour game. And so by the time we get to 9:30, 10 o'clock for a night game, I always say, when the game's over, whether you've won or lost, and coaches don't like to hear this, but it's the truth. If you've won, all anybody wants to do is get a shower and go get something to eat and go home. When you've lost, all they ever want to do is get a shower, get something to eat, go home, and go to bed. That's all they want to do. And so to me, you just need to get them out of there, especially like for us, it's on like a Tuesday night, they have class the next day. That's one thing, but I don't believe it's a teachable moment. And I truly believe that for 90% of the coaches that have these meetings, and when I talk to them, they always 100% across the board, they admit this. I'll say, who's that meeting for? You or them? And every coach to a T says, well, I wouldn't know what to do. I got to get these things off my chest. No, you don't. There's better teachable moments. So what we do is, now if I have an issue with attitude or effort during a game, I will address that. If we've just lost a really tough game, like we played well and, we lost in the bottom of the ninth on a walk-off or something like that, I will definitely meet with the team to encourage them to try and send them home in a more positive mindset. But what we do is the next day. So let's say we played Friday night and Saturday. So now we have a game on Saturday. Baseball's played in 3-game series on a weekend. 10 minutes before we stretch the next day, we have a classroom and we meet. And I have my game notes and my assistant coaches have their game notes. And what you end up doing is some of the things that you've written down, maybe I have an issue with you. I don't need to address that in front of the team. My emotions are gone. I can just grab you and you and I can talk about it. If it's a team thing, like say we messed up a rundown or maybe we did a really good job with a rundown. Well, now I have the video queued up and ready. And now it's a teachable moment. Say, look, guys, look what a great job we did with this. And they see it. Or the pitcher didn't do a good job of backing up third base. And after a game, let's say we've lost, I may have been in an emotional state where I've been screamed and yelled at him in front of the team, or screamed and yelled at the middle infielders on a tandem relay. And whereas now I can show them and they see, oh yeah, wow, I thought I was in position. I really wasn't in position. So it's a way more teachable moment. And you can do that and you can say, all right, everybody understand? Any questions? And try to show as much positive if you can as the negative. And then, all right, let's go stretch. We've got a new ball game to play. And so it's just been that much better. And then from a personal standpoint, it's just, number one, I get home and my children are grown now, but it put me home earlier after a game. I just think it's holistically, it's been better for everybody involved.
So in 2006, you had the opportunity to coach the USA baseball team. What was that experience like for you, and what was it like to work with other, top coaches in baseball during that time?
Yeah, so I've been a part of 2 USA teams, 2006 as the assistant coach, pitching coach, and 2013 as they don't call it the head coach, they call it the manager because it's more of a professional setting. I didn't play, like I told you, I didn't play professional baseball, certainly didn't play in the big leagues, but other than going to the College World Series 6 times, five here and 1 as an assistant coach at Tulane, it's the closest thing to the big leagues I've ever been a part of because it's just a baseball job. There's no recruiting, there's no fundraising. It's just being around the players every single day, helping them improve. Obviously, wearing your country's uniform is phenomenal. And you touched on just it's literally a coaches clinic, coaches convention every single day. You travel around the country, you travel around the world with 3 or 4 other coaches that you respect, and you can talk about things like, hey, why do you meet with the team after a game? Or what do you guys do for this bunt defense? And every single day, you're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. You're working out together. You're on a bus. You're on a plane, and you're coaching the best players, and you're getting to develop those relationships. And so, if I didn't have a family and if I didn't have a real job, I would want to do it every single summer because it's that much fun. I'm sure I'll do it again if given the opportunity. But the relationships that I've built with those players, there are some that I've been to their weddings, and the way we talk and text and communicate, you would think that the guy played for me in college when he went to some school on the other side of the country, but we developed that bond in the course of a summer. So it's awesome. I'm very grateful to be a part of USA Baseball.
Is there an example of something you learned from one of the other coaches on staff, or a moment that's really stuck with you that you've tried to apply to your program?
There are a lot of baseball related things, but different batting practices, different ways to do kind of the same things. Tim Corbin at Vanderbilt, he and I have known each other since 1990 when I was a student assistant coach at Elon, and he was the head baseball coach at Presbyterian College in Clinton, South Carolina. So we've had a lot of great experiences together. But certainly, he's a guy that loves to talk baseball, loves to talk culture. He's probably the first or close to the first to put a classroom in his baseball facility. And it's something that I had always wanted to do, but I'd never had kind of I guess to use a Southern word, gumption to go do it. I don't know if that's a word, but other than not meeting with teams after games, the second greatest move that I've ever made. And Tim was the originator of this, at least in my mind, and I'll never coach anywhere again without it, is to have a classroom in our facility.
Talk to me about that. Is that a specific classroom with chairs? Is it more of like an auditorium for you to talk film with? And how do you utilize that with the program?
Yeah, so it's a classroom. I didn't want a theater style setting, although there's nothing wrong with that. I wanted a true, just like you would see across the rest of our campus, just a flat classroom and tables and chairs. One entire wall is now you can make those. It's like a wallpaper you put across. It's nothing but you can write on it like a grease board and wipe it off. And then we have our video system pumped in with a projector, so I can show the video up against that wall, and you can write on it. It's kind of like a football coach approach to teaching. But I'm just a big believer in three things. I believe players need to, in baseball at least, they need a place to get dressed and undressed. What's that called? A locker room. They need a place to hang out because we have a lot of dead time in our sport. But we also, players need a place to relax, and that's called a lounge. And then they need a place to learn, and that's called a classroom. And 90% of the places in the country, including TCU, until we built this classroom, it's always in the same spot, right? So I used to have, if I wanted to go over bunt defense, or I wanted to show them a video, or I wanted to have a guest speaker, or we wanted to do have our FCA guy come up from campus come in and speak. We only had one place, so I would have to go into their space, their locker room. Some guys are half naked. Guys have been jacking around, telling jokes. Now I'm trying to get them quiet, trying to get them focused. And we can do it, and it's being done fine all across the country at different places, but it's just not ideal for the way we run our program. And so now there is a locker room where you change. There is a lounge where you can watch TV, study, eat, play ping pong, play video games. And there is a classroom and if you were to be here, as the guys come down the hall and they're jacking with each other, they're loud, they're talking. And as soon as they walk in that classroom, the entire atmosphere changes because it's like walking in a classroom on campus. Now I'm here to learn something. And whether that be the scouting report and video of the starting pitcher for that night, or whether it be a guest speaker, or whether it be, an FCA thing, it's a facility that has a very clear and defined purpose that I'll never coach without again.
You touched on the FCA working with your program. How does your faith kind of impact the way you coach?
Well, I mean, it's just, there's only ever been one perfect guy on the history of the planet, and they nailed him to a cross. So, by no means am I even close to that. I fail every day, both in my faith and, with my job. But it's who I am. It's who I was raised to be. It's it's where I ultimately want to end up, and try to live by the greatest commandment outside of greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart and all your soul, and the second is to love your neighbor and treat people how you want to be treated. So knowing that my job is really character and leadership development of young people through the sport of baseball. That the backbone of who I am and what I want to stand for would be my faith. But that doesn't mean that you have to be a Christian. That doesn't mean that I'm trying to save you. I'm just with FCA, the way we work FCA here is we have one meeting that everybody has to attend the very first time, and that's just to meet our guy Chauncey Franks who's awesome. He runs our FCA. We hand out the FCA Bibles. If you're Jewish, you don't have to take one. If you're Muslim, you don't have to take one. And then from that point forward, every Thursday we have what's called baseball chapel, and it happens at a certain time each day, whether we're getting on a bus or whether we're at the end of practice if we have a home series, and it's completely optional. And some years we'll have, some days there might be 8 out of 30 in there. Sometimes there's 20 out of 30. But I will tell you that our most successful teams have had more. The numbers have been higher in baseball chapel, not because there's been more Christians, but just more togetherness, more guys that are curious, more interaction from player to player. So that's, again, I just say, hey, listen, this is just like I do with anything else. Here's an opportunity for you. You take advantage of it if you like. If it's not a part of who you are, we don't think any less of you, whatsoever. But it is going to be a part of our program, at least from the head coaching standpoint.
That's great. How do you balance kind of being the head coach? You're basically the CEO of the program. You got a lot of people you're responsible for. There's a lot of stress involved with the job. How do you kind of handle the stress of it personally, and then make sure it's not impacting your life outside the baseball field?
Yeah, that's a great question. That is very hard to answer, and I'm constantly evolving in that. Both of my children are now in college. I was married for 23 plus years, and then last year just went through a divorce, which is an awful, awful, awful experience. I don't care, and she and I are friends, but I don't have any problem talking about it because I don't care how amicable it is. It's still in my mind, it's a failure. And because when you stand at the altar and you say, it's a covenant. A covenant is it's a way bigger, deeper word than a promise. In the Bible, the covenant was actually a blood covenant. And when you say for better or worse, I'm a big believer in that. And it didn't work or it failed at least. And part of that was on my end. If you said, where could you have been better? It would have been separating the job from personal life. And I live, it's further. I'm sitting in our ballpark right now down the left field line. It is actually further from where I'm sitting to the right field foul pole than it is from where I'm sitting to my house. And I live right next to the baseball stadium. And it's not technically on campus. I'm just on the other side of the street from campus. And when my children were younger and in their teen or like middle school years, it was awesome. It's awesome to raise your family on a college campus, home football game. Here's your ticket. Go do what you want to do. They went to basketball games, soccer games, played on the campus, grew up, and it was awesome. But there was a very negative side to that, in that there was no separation, not nearly as much privacy as I would have liked, but also my wife would have appreciated. And 3 years ago, we bought a lake house about 30 minutes away, and that changed my life because it gave me a release, a place to go to. I didn't grow up with that kind of stuff. I don't play golf, which is, again, it's probably a bad thing. I do like to fish, but I'm not a fisherman by any means. But if you don't have something else going in your life, that can be a negative. And I've kind of always prided myself that my job is not a job, it's a lifestyle. And I think part of the reason that we've had success is because of that, but also part of the reason that my marriage failed could be because of that too. And I'm self-aware enough to recognize that. So at 50 years old, I'm trying to do a better job of that. And I'm still a work in progress.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. That's I really appreciate that.
Sure.
Coach, as we wrap up, where can people find more about you before we kind of get to our end of episode questions?
Twitter, through our website, but social media. I'm pretty active on Twitter, simply because I think it's a way to sell your program, brand your program. It's become such a huge part of the recruiting process now. Ideally, I wish it wasn't that way, but it is. So, follow me on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, but not incredibly active. If you ever see me on TikTok, point and pull the trigger, because that would be a really bad deal. I don't even know hardly what that is, except for my kids show me funny videos. But yeah. But also, I invite especially coaches, high school coaches, anybody, any coach. Our practices, well, not during COVID, but during normal time, are completely open. And during normal times, we have, especially in the fall, we'll have at least a dozen college, junior college, high school programs coaches come through and spend a couple of days with us. And I love that because we get to exchange ideas and get to learn more about each other.
That's great, and I appreciate you sharing everything today. So the end of episode questions for you. So what's one book you think every coach should read?
Compound Effect. That would be, this book is a game changer for me, and I think it's great for the team. So I would say The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, or anything written by my man John Gordon, is outstanding. All of his stuff is applicable in all areas of life.
What's one person you'd want to hear as a guest on this podcast?
Nick Saban.
What's one area you're looking to improve in over the next year?
Be more consistent with my sleep. I'm a horrible sleeper.
What's popular advice you hear people say you think is wrong?
I won't say this advice is wrong. It's what do you hear every retired, aging coach say at the end of their career? They all say, and it's usually the most successful ones, they all say, I wish I would have enjoyed the journey more. And I understand that now. And I think what they mean is that they wish they would have maybe invested in more in the relationships, enjoyed interaction with the kids more. But I believe you only ever hear super successful coaches say that. And I believe part of the reason why they were so successful is because of how they were so driven. And, again, we just talked about some of the things that, my divorce and, not taking the performance home from practice or whatever. And so I think there's a negative side to that for sure, but there's also a positive side, at least a successful side to, coaching is it's not an occupation. It's a lifestyle. It's something that it's a 24/7 investment, kind of like education. And so I won't say that advice is wrong. I just think that there are positive sides to it.
Yep. Agreed. What advice do you have for young coaches who are listening to this?
Be a lifelong learner. And there would be two things. One, be a lifelong learner. I'm in constant search of ways to either say it differently or do it better, regardless of any kind of success that we've had. And then the other thing would be wait as long as you can in your career to make decisions based on money. Make career decisions based on what is the best opportunity for you to learn from somebody or to be a part of a winner versus make another $5,000. And I know everybody has bills to pay, but I'm a true believer that the longer you wait to base your career decisions on money, the more money you'll make in the end.
It's great advice. Last question for you. What's the darkest moment you experienced professionally, and how did you overcome it?
The darkest moment was just our entire season of 2013. I did a very, very poor job of managing the program that year. I had a staff that was talented but not cohesive, that had very, very different personalities that I wish I would have addressed more on the front end. I think it could have helped our team more. But at the end of the year, we made some changes, and it wasn't necessarily, didn't fire anybody really per se, but it kind of took care of itself. I don't need to talk beyond that, but it allowed us to reinvigorate the program. And ironically, that's the summer that I was the manager of the USA team. And so thank goodness I had that, because we had such a bad season. We still almost, won a conference championship, or a conference tournament, but it was just it was an epic failure and I take full blame for it. And it'll never happen again on my watch.
Well, I appreciate everything you've shared today, Coach. I really do. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. This has been awesome.
You've been listening to the Coaching Coaches Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and receive our world-class newsletter in your inbox every Sunday. You can access both of those at coachingcoaches.co. Once again, that's coachingcoaches.co.